All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Know Your Ballot. This is a proud partnership between the League of Women Voters of Santa Cruz County and the Santa Cruz Public Libraries. To join only by phone, please dial 1-888-788-0099 and then enter the webinar ID of 948-1351-9481. An alternative number is 1-877-853-5247. And then again, enter that webinar ID of 948-1351-9481. As an attendee, this event is being recorded and will be available on the library's YouTube channel. Your microphone is muted for the entire presentation, although you do not need a microphone, camera, or a screen if you only want to listen to the presentation, as this event is accessible by using a phone only. If you need assistance, please call the library's telephone information line at 1-831-427-7713. And we would appreciate it if everyone could take our quick poll at the very end of the event. It's only 3 questions. Speaking of questions, questions are encouraged. Use the Q&A feature to ask your questions. Please add the proposition number in front of your question. For example, 19, if my adult child doesn't move into my home within 1 year of my death, does the property get reassessed? If you're joining by computer, you may use this Q&A feature to type your questions or comments. Down at the bottom on the Zoom attendee control bar, you'll see that Q&A icon. The lower left corner, you'll see audio settings. In the center, you'll see Q&A, and then leave in a red rectangle. If you're using a mobile device, the Zoom control bar and Q&A icon will likely appear near the top of your screen. So in reverse, you'll see leave in that red rectangle in the upper left corner, then the Q&A icon over to the right, and 3 dots for more. Alternatively, you may call the library's telephone information line to timely submit your question at 1-831-427-7713. These will also be read by the moderator to our panelists. Once the program begins, if you're joining by computer to see all panelists, you may need to use the Zoom control bar and select Gallery View. Depending on the size of your mobile device screen, you may need to scroll over to view whomever's speaking. If you're accessing this meeting via the web browser only or a Chromebook, you may not see all panelists at one time, only the panelists speaking. If you haven't already, be sure to check out santacruzpl.org and discover all of the free resources available with just your library card. Everything from reserving a book for curbside pickup to audiobooks, movies, tutoring, and more. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel too. Jen Hooker, one of our librarians, will now introduce our program and our partners from the League of Women Voters of Santa Cruz County. Transitioning to Gallery View now, please stand by.
All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We have an excellent program prepared for you, but before we get to that, I wanted to introduce myself and the plan for the day. My name is Jennifer Hooker, and I'm a librarian with the Santa Cruz Public Libraries. As many of you know, we have a very important election coming up on November 3rd, but there's more at stake than just the presidency and the election of other officials. Today, we're very excited to have partnered with the League of Women Voters to bring you a bipartisan pro and con assessment of the measures on the ballot this year. As my colleague mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, please enter them into the Q&A section. And when you ask a question in the Q&A, please put the proposition number before your question so we can clump relevant questions together. Also, if you see a question that's already been asked, you can click the little thumbs up icon and that will boost that question. We'll begin to answer questions around 11 a.m. after our guests have covered all the ballot measures. We will not be answering questions until then, so please be patient. This program is also being recorded, so if you have to leave early, you can find the recording on the library's YouTube page a little later on in the week. After the program is over, you'll receive a follow-up survey in your email, so please make sure to take a moment and fill that out as well so we know how we did and how we can improve our virtual programs. With all of that said, I'm very happy to introduce our guest speakers today from the League of Women Voters, Dorothy Fry, Kit Hine, and Sandy Warren. Dorothy and Kit have served as first and second vice presidents, respectively, of the League of Women Voters, and Sandy has served as both a board member and a general member. We are very excited to have them with us today and to discuss the pros and cons of the measures in the upcoming election. Without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Dorothy.
Welcome to the League of Women Voters presentation on the state ballot measures. California voters will be deciding on 12 propositions for this November ballot. And propositions are proposed laws presented to the public to vote on. Propositions can make new laws, change existing laws, and sometimes they change the state constitution. They can be placed on the ballot by citizens or by state lawmakers. A proposition passes and becomes law if it receives more than 50% yes votes. The 12 propositions are numbered 14 through 25. Now 14 through 24 are initiatives, and a yes vote means, for an initiative, a yes vote means that you support the way the proposition would change things, and a no vote means you want to leave things the way they are now. Proposition 25 is a referendum, which asks voters to decide on a law that was already passed. For a referendum, a yes vote means you support the law and want to keep it. A no vote means you do not want the law to go into effect. Now, the League of Women Voters does have positions on ballot propositions, but we will not state them during this presentation. And you can go to the organization's website for this. It's cavotes.org, and this is what it looks like when you get there. And you can also go to the link that says read more, and you will get more detail on a particular proposition. Now Kit will start with Proposition 14.
Thank you, Dorothy. Proposition 14, the California Stem Cell Research, Treatment, and Cures Initiative of 2020. A yes vote on Proposition 14 supports the issuing of $5.5 billion in general obligation bonds to support research and development of stem cell treatments. A no vote opposes the issuing of those bonds. In 2004, voters approved Proposition 71, which added a provision to the California Constitution allowing stem cell research. The measure also created the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine, CIRM, and allowed the state to sell $3 billion in bonds to fund CIRM grants and operations. As of June 2020, almost all of the funds from the sale of those bonds authorized by Prop 71 have been spent. Prop 14 would allow the state to sell $5.5 billion in new bonds to continue the CIRM's funding of stem cell and other medical research and training, stem cell therapy and delivery of treatments to patients, research facility construction, and administrative expenses. Proposition 14 also sets limits on the bond funds that can be used for administrative purposes. Proposition 14 would make several changes to the CIRM and its governing board intended to expand patient access to stem cell treatment. The total costs are estimated at $7.8 billion over a 30-year period. The state also is entitled to revenue from new inventions resulting from research or treatments funded by the CIRM. The future revenue source is uncertain. Many times, research does not lead to new inventions, and a significant amount of time can pass between research and licensing of an invention. There could be indirect fiscal effects for some healthcare programs, such as Medi-Cal, but the net fiscal impact is unknown. Supporters say that California's stem cell funding has led to significant advances in treatments and cures for many diseases, including over 2,900 medical discoveries. Proposition 14 will increase patient access and affordable treatments and provide patients, their families, and caregivers with financial assistance. Proposition 14 will contribute to the rebound of California's economy. Funding to date has generated about $10.7 billion in economic stimulus. Supporters include Robert N. Klein II, a real estate investor and stem cell research advocate, Libby Schaft, the mayor of Oakland, the University of California Board of Regents, the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research, the Latino Cancer Institute, and the Sickle Cell Disease Foundation of California. Total contributions in favor of this proposition are $9,298,860. Opponents say Californians cannot afford $7.3 billion for Proposition 14 bonds, particularly in the middle of an economic crisis, and repayment of the bonds will increase taxes. Previous funding has not yielded the promised results for treatments or economic benefits. In fact, private investors and companies have made great strides in stem cell research and cures. Independent analysts and news outlets have questioned the management integrity and transparency of the CIRM. Opponents include Jeff Sheehy, a board member of the CIRM, Marcy Dovnovsky, executive director of the Center for Genetic and Society, the Orange County Register, Bakersfield Californian, the Los Angeles Times, and the Santa Cruz Sentinel. Thank you. I will now pass the mic on to Dorothy for Prop 15, excuse me.
Proposition 15 would change the rules for taxes on commercial property. The question is, should the California Constitution be amended so that most commercial property is reassessed on a regular basis? The situation is that back in 1978, Proposition 13 was passed, and this limited property tax valuation and rates. Property taxes for both residential and business properties are now based on 1% of the property value at purchase price. Annual increases are capped at 2% even when property values rise more. A property is reassessed to market value when it is purchased when ownership changes hands. Because the value of property has typically increased much faster than 2% per year, the assessed value of most property in the state is less than market value. And this is particularly true of commercial property, which changes ownership less often than residential property. Property taxes are a major source of funding for cities, counties, public schools, and special districts such as libraries and fire districts. Now, the proposal for Proposition 15 is that it would change the rules for taxes on commercial property. It would require that commercial property be reassessed to current market value every 3 years, instead of small increases each year based on purchase price. This would apply only to commercial properties over $3 million. It also exempts small businesses defined as fewer than 50 employees from personal property tax. That means business equipment. And for other businesses provides $500,000 personal property exemption. Reassessment of commercial property would be phased in starting 2022-23. There would be no change in taxes on residential, both owner occupied and rental, and also agricultural land. Now, the fiscal effects would be that the additional revenue is estimated at $6.5 billion to $12 billion per year, and would go to local governments at 60% and schools at 40%. And now, as far as schools go, any additional educational funding will supplement existing school funding guarantees. The counties will have to spend more to pay for the cost of administering this measure, such as hiring more county assessors. The measure sets aside money for costs created by the measure. Now, the supporters for Prop 15 says it diversifies the state revenue base and provides billions in new revenue for our communities and schools. Commercial properties worth more than $3 million should pay their fair share of property taxes. It closes the loophole of transfer partial ownership. It gives tax breaks to small businesses. It keeps Proposition 13's protection for homeowners, renters, and farms. The organizations supporting this are California Teachers Association, California Superintendent of Public Instruction, Working Partnerships USA, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Gavin Newsom, and SEIU, that is the Service Employees International Union. Now, the opponents say Proposition 15 would trigger the largest property tax increase in California history. Additional costs will ultimately raise prices for consumers. It will make it harder for people to start small businesses, and it will require a huge cost to administer. The opponents are groups are Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association, the California Taxpayer Association, the California Business Roundtable, California Small Business Association, California Chamber of Commerce, and the California Assessors Association. Now we will go to Sandy for Proposition 16.
Proposition 16 is a constitutional amendment from the legislature. This proposition would allow public colleges, universities, and agencies to include race, sex, color, ethnicity, and country of origin as part of their decision-making. In 1996, California voters passed a law that prevented public programs from using affirmative action in decisions. There is no fiscal effect on state or local budgets from this proposition, but a yes vote will help women and people of color fight patterns of discrimination, as all deserve equal opportunities. Those supporting a no vote say the state should treat everyone equally and not favor one racial or ethnic group over another. Groups supporting this measure with a yes vote include teachers unions, the Board of Regents, the AAUW, Equal Justice Society, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, and Dr. Bernice King, CEO of the Martin Luther King Jr. Center. A no vote is supported by California for Equal Rights, Betty Tom Chu, a former California Constitutional Revision Commissioner, and some other individuals. Now Kit will do Proposition 17.
Thank you, Sandy. Proposition 17, the restoration of voting rights to convicted felons upon completion of their prison term. A yes vote supports this constitutional amendment, which would allow people on parole for felony convictions to vote. A no vote opposes this constitutional amendment. Currently, the California Constitution prohibits people in prison or on parole from voting. People who are in county jail or supervised by county probation can vote. This ballot measure would still prohibit people in prison from voting, but would allow those on parole to vote. Currently, there are approximately 50,000 people on state parole. Proposition 17 amends the California Constitution to restore voting rights to persons who have been disqualified from voting while serving in a prison term as soon as they complete their prison sentence. Those eligible to register to vote may also run for elective offices if qualified. Annual costs of increased voter rolls would likely be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars statewide, administered at county level. Actual costs depend on the number of people on state parole who choose to register to vote and the specific costs of providing them with ballot materials. It creates a one-time workload for the state to update voter registration systems, likely resulting in a cost in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Supporters say when people complete their prison sentences, they should be encouraged to re-enter society and have a stake in their community. Restoring their voting rights does that. 19 other states allow people to vote once they have successfully completed their prison sentences. Nearly 50,000 Californians who have completed their prison terms pay taxes at local, state, and federal levels, yet are prohibited from voting at any level of government. The current law disproportionately affects people of color. Supporters include U.S. Senator Kamala Harris, State Senators Stephen Bradford, Holly Mitchell, and Scott Wiener, Assembly members Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher, Ash Kalra, Kevin Mullen, and Wendy Carrillo. Secretary of State Alex Padilla, the California Democratic Party, and the ACLU of California. Total contributions so far in favor of Prop 17 are $582,102. Opponents say Proposition 17 will allow violent criminals to vote before completing their sentence, which includes parole. Giving people a parole social equality before full rehabilitation will add to victims' pain and suffering. And parole is to prove rehabilitation before full liberty, including voting rights, is restored. Opponents include State Senator Jim Nielsen and the Republican Party of California. Now Dorothy will do Proposition 18.
Thank you, Kit. Proposition 18 is about voting rights for 17-year-olds. It will amend the California Constitution to permit 17-year-olds to vote in primary and special elections only if they will be 18 by the general election. Right now, 17-year-olds who are US citizens can pre-register to vote in California. They can only vote if they have turned 18 by election day. Now, again, the proposal is that Prop 18 would allow 17-year-olds to vote in primary elections and special elections if they will be 18 years old by the general election in November. The fiscal cost would be, Proposition 18 would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars statewide for every 2-year election cycle. County officials would spend more money sending out voter information and county ballots. The state would have to fund this, including updating voter registration systems. The supporters say Proposition 18 will allow 17 to 18-year-olds to participate in a full election cycle. It will boost the number of youth who actually vote. The 17-year-old to 18-year-olds are heavily affected by policies that they should be able to vote on these policies. 18 other states allow 17-year-olds to vote in primaries. It also encourages young people to be involved in the lifelong journey of voting, one of the essential factors in democracy. Alex Padilla, California Secretary of State, supports it. Also, Kevin Mullen, Assemblyman, who is the author of this measure, and the California League of Conservation Voters. Now, opponents say allowing 17-year-olds to vote in primaries on tax issues and bonds is not right because they have not paid taxes. They will be biased by who influences them. 17-year-olds are too young to vote and need more life experience before they are ready. 17-year-olds' brains are not fully developed in the logic and reasoning portion, so they would just be making bad decisions. Schools would be able to influence the way that 17-year-olds vote by teachers advocating for certain policies. This proposition is opposed by a group called Election Integrity Project California and the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association. I will now pass this on to Sandy for Proposition 19.
Proposition 19 is a legislative constitutional amendment which would expand property tax rules for some people, those over 55, the disabled, and those affected by a natural disaster. These people would keep lower property tax rates when moving anywhere within the state and could use this provision 3 times. These funds would be placed in a fund earmarked to support firefighting. A yes vote protects older voters and those who lose their home in a disaster. It's being supported by the California Professional Firefighters and the California for Disability Rights. Those favoring a no vote say it is a tax increase and might hurt those inheriting homes. Seniors are already allowed to keep their current tax assessment when they purchase a home of equal or lesser value in their county or in a reciprocal county. Earmarking the funds for firefighting will make it more difficult to fund other natural disasters or public health crises. The no position is supported by John Kupel, the president of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, and Senator Patricia Bates and Assemblyman Ken Cooley. Dorothy will now do Prop 20.
Thank you, Sandy. Proposition 20 changes to criminal penalties and parole. And the question is, should California law be amended to make changes to the process by which people are charged with certain crimes and granted parole? In the past, California has passed 3 criminal justice measures: Assembly Bill 109 in 2011, Proposition 47 in 2014, and Proposition 57 in 2016. And this was intended to reduce the state prison population as ordered by the courts. AB 109 shifted people convicted of a variety of nonviolent felonies from state to local county jails. Proposition 47 redefined certain nonviolent felonies as misdemeanors, unless the defendant had previous convictions for certain violent crimes. And it allowed resentencing for people convicted for the redefined offenses. Proposition 57 in 2016 increased opportunities for parole for people convicted of nonviolent felonies who had completed the sentences for their primary offense. Now, the proposal is that Proposition 20 would roll back parts of Assembly Bill 109, Propositions 47 and 57. Certain theft and fraud offenses that were made misdemeanors by Proposition 47 would become wobblers, meaning that they would be charged as either misdemeanors or felonies, regardless of the value of the item stolen. Proposition 20 requires the collection of DNA from people convicted for a variety of crimes, including some crimes that were redefined as misdemeanors by Proposition 47. Proposition 20 creates a list of criteria for the Board of Parole hearings to use for granting parole to an inmate convicted of a nonviolent crime under the provisions of Proposition 57 in 2016. Allows prosecutors to review the board's decision and allow victims' families to participate in parole review. Proposition 20 expands the list of crimes classified as violent crimes in order to exclude those crimes from the provisions of Proposition 57. Proposition 20 changes information provided to local officials when a person is released on parole or probation. It requires that counties request that parole or probation be revoked if violated for a third time. Precise costs are difficult to estimate, but because it would increase the prison population and change the post-release supervision, Proposition 20 would increase state and local court-related costs and law enforcement costs by millions of dollars annually, approximately 5 million. Supporters say Proposition 20 reclassifies certain crimes as violent and would ensure that people convicted of these crimes serve their full sentences. From people convicted of drug possession or shoplifting will help solve more serious crimes. Proposition 20 will help stop car break-ins, shoplifting, and other theft that has been on the rise. The groups that support it are Crime Victims Alliance, Law Enforcement, California Police Chiefs Association, Prison Guards Union, the California Chamber of Commerce. Now, the opponents say Proposition 20 will roll back criminal justice reforms and cost taxpayers millions of dollars annually. Proposition 20 slashes mental health and rehabilitation programs that help to prepare people for release from prison and reduce repeat offenses. Proposition 20 will result in extreme sentences for petty theft and will disproportionately impact vulnerable minorities. The opponents are Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice, retired police chief of San Diego, Reed Hastings and his wife Patty, Gavin Newsom, and Jerry Brown. Kit will now present Proposition 21.
Thank you, Dorothy. Proposition 21, the Rental Affordability Act. A yes vote supports this ballot initiative to allow local governments to enact rental control on housing that was first occupied over 15 years ago, with an exception for landlords who own no more than 2 homes with distinct titles or subdivided interests. A no vote opposes this ballot initiative, thereby continuing to prohibit rent control on housing that was first occupied after February 1st, 1995, and housing units with distinct titles, such as single-family homes. California renters typically pay 50% more for housing than renters in other states. Currently, about 1/5 of Californians are subject to so-called rent control laws, which limit how much their housing rent can increase annually. Courts have ruled that such laws must allow landlords to receive a fair rate of return, meaning that landlords must be allowed to realize some profit each year. Currently, a state law known as the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act limits local rent control laws. Prop 21 would reduce the limits on local rent control laws in Costa-Hawkins so that cities and counties can apply rent control to more properties. Additionally, cities and counties would be able to limit how much a landlord can increase rents when a new renter moves in. Proposition 21 would require that rent control laws allow landlords a fair rate of return. The fiscal effect is if communities expand rent control laws, the most likely effects are some landlords would sell their rental housing to new owners who would live there. The value of rental housing would decline. Some landlords would receive less rental income, and some renters would move less often. The overall effects would depend on how many communities pass new laws, how many properties are covered, and how much rents are limited. The overall effect on state income tax revenue is not clear. Proposition 21 likely would reduce state and local revenues over time, particularly property taxes. A decline in the value of rental properties would reduce property tax payments over time, only partially offset by higher property tax payments resulting from the sales of rental housing. Renters paying less rent would use some of their savings to buy taxable goods, increasing sales taxes. If cities or counties create new rent control laws or expand existing ones, local rent boards would have increased costs. Supporters say that even small increases in rent forces many families into homelessness, a burden on the entire community. They say that many seniors and veterans presently are left with too few resources to buy food, medical care, and other needs. Proposition 21 guarantees landlords a reasonable profit. Supporters include U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders, U.S. Representative Maxine Waters, the California Democratic Party, Dolores Huerta, the co-founder of the United Farm Workers, the SEIU California State Council, California Nurses Association, and the ACLU of Southern California. Total contributions in favor of this measure so far total more than $16 million. Opponents say more than 60% of Californians rejected this type of scheme in 2018. Rent control results in less available and less affordable housing. Proposition 21 will stop new housing from being built, cost jobs, and hurt the economic recovery. Opponents include the Californians for Responsible Housing, Governor Gavin Newsom, the Republican Party of California, the California Council of Affordable Housing, the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, and the California Seniors Advocates League. Total contributions against this measure are more than $30 million. And now Sandy will do Proposition 22.
Proposition 22. Currently, an independent contractor can choose when, where, and how much to work. An employee has these things set by their employer. Employees can get benefits and minimum wages and overtime pay. The rideshare companies, Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash, hired drivers as independent contractors. A 2019 law requires them to hire drivers as employees. State Attorney General and 3 cities are suing Uber and Lyft for not following this law. If this passes, drivers would remain independent contractors, but would have to be paid 20% more than local minimum wage. If they drive over 15 hours per week, companies would have to pay medical costs if a driver is injured while working. Yes opponents say drivers want to work as independent contractors, and forcing companies to make them employees would get rid of hundreds of jobs. Yes is backed by all the rideshare companies, Lyft, Uber, DoorDash, etc., and by the California Small Business Association, the NAACP, the California Chamber of Commerce, and the California Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. No says treating drivers as employees will make sure they get sick pay and unemployment benefits. This position is backed by several labor unions, including the California Labor Federation, the California Teachers Association, the SEIU, and also by some big name politicians like Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, and Joe Biden. A lot of money is being spent on both sides of this, making this one of the most expensive in total for and against funds spent propositions ever. As of October 1st, over $202 million was spent. Kit will now do Proposition 23.
Thank you, Sandy. Proposition 23, Protect the Lives of Dialysis Patients Act. A yes vote supports this ballot initiative to require chronic dialysis clinics to have an on-site physician while patients are being treated, to report data on dialysis-related infections, to obtain consent from the state health department before closing a clinic, and to not discriminate against patients based on their source of payment for care. A no vote opposes this ballot initiative. To address dialysis patients' needs, clinics often operate 6 days a week for extended hours. These clinics are licensed by the California Department of Public Health using federal certification standards, which have limited requirements about staffing hours or ratios. The majority of the 600 clinics in California are owned and run by one of 2 private for-profit companies. Estimated annual revenue of the private companies is $3 billion. Most dialysis is paid for by Medicare and Medi-Cal. These government programs pay a fixed rate established by regulation and close to the average cost of treatment. Private insurance also covers dialysis with payment rates fixed by negotiation with the providers. On average, those rates are multiple times higher than those paid by the government programs. Proposition 23 says that clinics must have at least 1 licensed physician on site during all hours when patients are receiving treatment. An exemption may be granted if a nurse practitioner or physician assistant is on site. They must offer the same level of care to all patients, regardless of whether treatment is paid for by private insurance or a government program. They must report more information about infections among their patients to the state health department, and they must notify and obtain consent from the state health department before closing or reducing services. The fiscal effect of Proposition 23 could increase costs for clinics, which could average several $100,000 per year per clinic. The new data reporting requirement would not significantly increase costs. Proposition 23 could increase healthcare costs to state and local governments if clinics negotiate higher reimbursement rates, or if some clinics close and patients have to receive treatment at more expensive facilities. Supporters say that patients should have access to a physician on site whenever dialysis treatment is being provided. Proper reporting and transparency of infection rates encourages clinics to improve quality, and strong protections should be provided to vulnerable patients when clinics close. Supporters include the California Democratic Party, the SEIU United Health Workers West, and total contributions in favor are $6,214,000. Opponents say Proposition 23 would force community dialysis clinics to cut services or close, putting lives at risk. Proposition 23 would make our physician shortage worse and lead to more overcrowding in emergency rooms. And dialysis clinics are already strictly regulated and provide high quality care. Opponents include the Republican Party of California, DaVita Inc., Fresenius Medical Care, the California Medical Association, the American Legion, and California NAACP State Conference. Total contributions opposing this measure are over $93 million. And now Dorothy will do Proposition 24.
Thank you, Kit. Proposition 24 is about consumer privacy laws. Proposition 24 would amend the 2018 Consumer Privacy Rights Act, which went into effect January 2020. There is concern that tech companies know too much about users and we don't know what they do with the data. The Consumer Privacy Act of 2018 brought consumers protections. It allows consumers to find out what data companies are collecting about them, tell a business to stop selling their personal data, and have their data removed from companies' files. Now, Proposition 24 would amend this Consumer Privacy Act of 2018, which I just explained. It allows consumers more easily to opt in and out of sharing their data. Consumers would contact companies to prevent them from sharing or using sensitive personal information. It increases penalties on companies that fail to follow regulations, for example, up to $7,500 for violating privacy rights of minors. It changes criteria for which businesses need to comply, and it creates a new state regulatory agency called the California Privacy Protection Agency to oversee and enforce the new law. The fiscal effect is that this new state agency would cost $10 million a year. Supporters say Proposition 24 would prevent businesses from using or sharing sensitive data about your health, finances, race, ethnicity, and precise location. It would strengthen existing protections by establishing a new California Privacy Protection Agency with $10 million a year. Number three, being a ballot initiative, it is less vulnerable to watering down by legislators due to pressure from lobbyists. The groups that support it are Common Sense Media, Consumer Watchdog, Californians for Consumer Privacy, Andrew Yang, Alistair McTaggart, and he was a major funder, Bob Hertzberg, a California Senate Majority Leader, and labor unions. Opponents say, complexity of the 52-page initiative is difficult to discern. Consumer groups with years of privacy expertise are divided about it. Proposition 24 puts the burden on consumers to opt out of data collection practices by allowing businesses to require consumers to contact each individual website in order to protect their data. The average consumer doesn't have time to do all that. Proposition 24 expanded pay for privacy through the addition of loyalty and reward programs. Businesses can charge consumers more or provide worse service if they choose to exercise their privacy rights. The 2018 California Consumer Privacy Rights Act just went into effect in January, and we need more time to evaluate it before enacting new laws. The groups that oppose this are Media Alliance, Consumer Federation of California, California Alliance for Retired Americans, Californians for Privacy Now, and the ACLU. Now, Sandy will do Proposition 25.
Okay, Proposition 25 is a referendum. This would ask the voters to decide if the state should get rid of bail. In 2018, the state legislature passed a law where people charged with less serious crimes would be released without having to pay bail. Putting a referendum on the ballot stops a law from going into effect. So putting this referendum on stopped that from going into effect. Proposition 25 would allow the new law to go into effect. Those urging a yes vote say the current system is unfair. Decisions should be based on public safety, not on a person's ability to pay. It's being supported by the California Democratic Party, Governor Newsom, the California Medical Association, the Service Employees International, and the president of the California for Safety and Justice, and the president of the Mental Health America of California. No supporters say this could make our communities less safe. Opposed groups include the California Peace Officers Association and the California Bail Agents Association. Some also say it does not sufficiently address the racial bias in the criminal justice system. So for that reason, the NAACP and the Human Rights Watch also oppose it. A yes vote means you support this bill getting rid of the bail and it will go into effect. A no vote means this bill will not go into effect. We will now have questions.
All right, your first question is Prop 15. Many business leases pass property taxes on to the leasee, often a small business. Is the new exemption of small businesses from personal property taxes for equipment calculated to roughly offset the increase in property tax?
Okay, I don't know if it's going to offset it. The opponents of Proposition 15 say that the renters would be the ones to pay for the increased taxes, and then also that these higher rents will mean costlier, would be passed on to consumers. Whereas the people that support the proposition say that the market provides a cap on the rent, and because the tenants can leave and find lower rents if there's a high market vacancy. Now, I don't know whether the $500,000 exemption for personal property, that means business equipment, would offset that, but it would help the small businesses, definitely. But I don't know if that would actually offset the entire rent increase. And rent increases are based on both a gross rent, which is everything included in the per square foot, or something called a triple net lease. And that's that can be property tax, insurance, and the common area maintenance. And they could be all included in this triple net lease. They're all included in the triple net lease, but each one is negotiated separately. So it depends on the tenant how they negotiate their rent when this goes into effect. So it's all completely negotiable. But your question of whether the $500,000 exemption would cover the rent increase, I don't know.
All right, and then just a reminder, we are taking questions, so please feel free to click on that Q&A icon down at the bottom of your Zoom control panel and type in your question. Now, moving on, our next question is about Prop 20. You have a couple of questions, and it says, did I hear you say that Prop 20 would enable the collection of DNA for anyone charged with these crimes? And then kind of a follow-up, but same question is, does this mandate DNA collection for people charged with crimes noted?
Yes, Proposition 20 would require, which means mandate, the collection of DNA from people convicted for a variety of crimes, including some crimes that were redefined as misdemeanors by Proposition 47. Therefore, DNA could be collected from people charged with misdemeanors. I can't remember the first question about that. The first part of the question.
The first part of the question said, did I hear you say that Prop 20 would enable the collection of DNA for anyone charged with these crimes?
Yes. And there was a second part of the question.
The second part was, does this mandate DNA collection for
Oh,
people charged with the
yes.
crimes noted?
It does require, that means mandate. Yes, it will mandate.
Great. And then this is a combo question for both 15 and 21. It says Prop 21 and impacts of passage of Prop 15. If Prop 15 and 21 pass, how are those tax rent issues reconciled?
I'm Dorothy, you're 15, aren't you?
I'm 15. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not sure I understand. Wait a minute, let me see if I can find the question.
So the question has a little green square and
Right,
a
I see
JL
it.
in it.
Blue and
Okay.
amber. Yes, I see it.
Okay, great.
Well, one thing is the rent control that pertains to residential properties. So that includes apartments, condos, and single family homes. So the property tax that is reassessed under Prop 15, that's for commercial properties, and residential properties would be exempt from being reassessed. So I think the question is, would 15 impact rent increases for rental properties? And no, because residential properties are exempt from this.
And there is a follow-up to that, and it says, aren't apartment buildings commercial? And then essentially, so if property taxes go up, but then there's rent control. So they're trying to
apartments are considered residential under this Prop 15. Apartments, condos, single family homes. It's all considered residential. So no.
But, okay.
Okay, I don't know if Kit wanted to add anything.
Yeah,
to that.
I'm not really sure how. If Prop 15 passes and Prop 21, because Prop 21 supports the rent control on an apartment building, I suppose that would mean that if Prop 15 passes on that apartment building as owned by the entire, by one company, I think that's what they're talking about, Dorothy.
Mm-hmm.
That would not be considered that owner's residential property. That would be considered their business property. So
my understanding is that apartments and condos would be exempt under this because they're considered residential, would be exempt under this Prop 15. That's my
Okay.
understanding.
Okay. Then
Okay.
it should not affect Prop 21.
All right, and now let's take Prop 16. How would Prop 16 be enacted? In which contexts and institutions would it ensure equal pay? What are the specific policies?
Off your mic.
Could you repeat the question one more time?
Yes, it says, how would Prop 16 be enacted? In which contexts and institutions would it ensure equal pay? And what are the specific policies?
Okay, well, it would allow public colleges and universities and public agencies to include affirmative action as part of their decision-making. So those are the kinds of groups that would be affected. I don't know if that answers what you want to know, or.
Well, Molly, if you'd like to ask a follow-up question on 16, we'll circle back around to you. How about that? Now, moving on to Prop 22, what is the split as to campaign expenditures between yes and no?
Okay, well, I did 22 and I was just trying to look that up.
Do you want me to come back to you?
Yeah, come back to me.
All right, let's move on. 23, is there any evidence supporting the claim that 75% of drivers support this measure?
I don't see any evidence. I'm not sure who's claiming that.
Okay. And then looks like 23 also says, is there any research on health emergencies that happen at clinics that have caused death or worse medical outcomes because a doctor is not available?
The only answers I've gotten to this are anecdotal. I don't know of research that's been done to things. And anecdotally, I have heard that the actual presence of a doctor in a clinic is not that the clinics that have caused death or worse medical outcomes because of a doctor not being available. The answer to that would be no, but that's only anecdotally on my part.
Okay, and Prop 24, I understand that the privacy organizations are split on this, and some believe it actually weakens the previous privacy law. Can you talk more about this?
Yes, that is what I understand, that there are consumer groups that have this privacy expertise, and they're divided about it. Some believe that this Prop 24 would not be good. They feel that the companies have, the tech companies have written this up so that they have the upper hand, and that they would require consumers to contact each individual website in order to protect their data. So the burden is on the customer. You have to contact every single one of them. And then also that they have written in a pay for privacy, that the companies will add loyalty and reward programs. And then they can if you decide to join their loyalty and reward programs, then you wouldn't be charged as much. But if you decide not to, they could either charge more or provide worse service if they choose to exercise their privacy rights. So they say it's too complex. It's a 52-page initiative. It's just too complex. And one of the main reasons that these groups oppose it is that the 2018 Consumer Privacy Rights Act just went into effect in January. We haven't had enough time to evaluate it. And why enact more laws until we evaluate how this works out for us? So those are their misgivings about it. But there's other groups, other privacy expertise groups that are for it. And one of the main faces of proponents is Andrew Yang, who was just a Democratic presidential hopeful. And he has put his name and money behind it because he thinks it's a good thing, that it will help consumers. So they're divided on it. There's also Alistair McTaggart, and he was a major funder for the first one that went on the ballot, and he's also a major funder for this one. And there's this California Senate Majority Leader who's behind it. So they're completely divided on this, and these are major groups that are privacy experts. So yeah, I think you have to read the material and decide for yourself on this one. So.
All right, did we want to go back to the Prop 22 question? What's the split as to campaign expenditures between a yes or a no?
All right. Well, most of the money has been spent on yes by Uber, Lyft, Door, and Instacart. I'd say that they spent 177 million of the 202 million. So they're the larger spenders.
Great, thank you. And now's your chance to enter in ask your questions, comments, clear up anything you are a little bit confused about. We can help you work through it. Just use that Q&A feature down at the bottom of your Zoom control panel. You'll see two little text bubbles, or just type it in right there. If the three of you have any follow-up to any of the questions that you already answered, now would be a good time while we wait for our attendees to enter in some more questions. We do have a question on...
Sarah, I do
Yes.
have something I'd like to say.
Absolutely.
Might be helpful for people. If everybody's received in the mail from the state ballot measure booklet, and if you are interested in finding out who the top contributors are for ballot measures, go to page 81 at the bottom of the page. It tells you to go to a website, and it's the California Fair Political Practices Commission, the FPPC. And there is a website available, and they will give you the top 10 contributors for each measure. So if you're interested in who's backing it and how much money has been put into it, this is a good resource. So go to the state ballot measure booklet that you got in the mail this past week. And it also goes through, if you want to review the pros and cons, the facts about it, it also has each measure in here. And in the front, it has a quick reference guide. It's very, very simplified. And then the rest of it, it gives more information. So go to this for further information. It's a good resource for you.
Great, thank you for that, Dorothy. We now have a question about back to Prop 24. Why is the ACLU against it?
That I don't know. You're going to have to look on the ACUL website to find out, what their reasons are. I
And then
do
you
not
have
know.
a request for number 25. Could you please repeat number 25? Why for, why against?
Okay. The yes people say the current system is unfair and decisions should be based on public safety, not a person's ability to pay. And it's being supported by the California Democratic Party, Governor Newsom, the California Medical Association, the Service Employees International, and the President of Californians for Safety and Justice, and the President of Mental Health of America. And the no proponents say this would make our communities less safe. And the opposed groups include the California Peace Officers Association and the California Bail Agents Association. And then because it does not sufficiently address racial bias in the criminal justice system, the NAACP and Human Rights Watch also opposed it.
We're back to Prop 15. How will family farms be affected by this proposition?
Good question. That came up. Let me get my. Okay, so first of all, family farms are agricultural land is exempted from the Proposition 15, and they will also be provided relief from the personal property tax. That would be the exemption of $500,000 if they have less than 50 employees. Proponents have said that proponents of Proposition 15 have said that their intent is to exempt land and improvements, and that this issue would be clarified in the implementation process. So if you want any more detail, I can go into more detail. I have about 2 or 3 pages on the agricultural impact.
Okay, and we have a question about number 25. What evidence is there that flight-based assessment is discriminatory? You won't see that one in the Q&A. That one came in a different direction. So the question again is, what evidence is there that flight-based assessment is discriminatory? And I can circle back, Sandy, if you'd like to look at that.
Okay, circle back.
All right, so we'll go back to Prop 19. How many properties are not sold upon inheritance? What is the fiscal impact of that portion? And then there's a second part to that question, so I'll let you answer the first part. How many properties are not sold upon inheritance? What is the fiscal impact of that portion?
We don't have any statistics on how many are sold or not sold upon inheritance. There are none provided in any of the materials. So,
Okay. And then the second part of that question, while only 8 states allow intra-county transfers of tax basis, don't most counties allow inter-county transfers?
yes. I mean, currently the law allows you to transfer in your county or a reciprocal county. But this would allow you to do, and that's one time. This would allow you to do it 3 times anywhere in the state.
And don't be shy. Feel free to ask your questions, submit your comments. Our volunteers here from the League of Women Voters of Santa Cruz County will be happy to help research it, answer the question for you. use that Q&A feature down at the bottom. All right, so let's go back to question 25. What evidence is there that a flight-based assessment is discriminatory? Do we have an answer on that yet? We do not have any additional open questions in the Q&A, so we are probably going to end our session a little bit early. We do have a little bit more information that we would love to provide you, and then we also have that poll that we would really appreciate if you could fill out. So let's see if we have an answer to question 25, or proposition 25. What evidence is there that flight-based assessment is discriminatory? And we also have another question on 19, anecdote. Presently, some counties do not allow transfer in California. What is the Santa Cruz allowance on this? Who had 19?
Sandy.
Sandy.
And so I'm not sure what they're basing their the fact that it's discriminatory on. I was looking for something in the write-up, but I can't find anything. Only that a larger percentage of
Sandy, the other option is we can circle back with that attendee after the session and see if we can't work this out.
okay.
And then 19, do you have any comments on 19? Presently, some counties do not allow transfer in California. What is the Santa Cruz allowance on this?
I don't know what Santa Cruz does. I'd have to try and research that as well. I don't know, do either Dottie or Kit, do you know? No.
Well, Kit, I believe that this is the end of the questions that we have from all of our attendees. So if you'd like to move on to your closing statements, I think that would be great.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. The League of Women Voters of Santa Cruz County wants to thank all of our listeners for their interest in the upcoming election. We encourage everyone to be sure to vote on or before November 3rd. Voting is a privilege and a responsibility. Your opinion matters and your voice needs to be heard. You can visit the County Department of Elections at votescount.us for more information on receiving your ballot, locating a polling place or a ballot drop-off box, and visiting a public forum for feedback, questions, and discussions held by Santa Cruz County Clerk Gail Pellerin. The League thanks you for being a participant.
And now we're moving over to Jen Hooker.
All right, thank you to Kit and Sandy and Dorothy for sharing the League of Women Voters nonpartisan representations of all the things on the ballot this election day. We're very happy to have you. Appreciate all of your your input and your feedback. And thank you for answering all those questions. Thank you to the audience for asking all of those questions. It proves that there's always some other thing that we need to look into when it comes to all of these measures, and really anything. You know, politics are so complicated that it really bears research on everyone's part. Thank you, Sarah, for facilitating this and for moderating the Q&A. If you folks watching wouldn't mind participating in this poll, this is going to be very quick. It's only 3 questions. It asks, do you feel more informed or confident about the ballot measures? Did you get the information you wanted on the ballot measures? And how did you hear about the event? And this helps us in a variety of ways. It also helps the League of Women Voters. So we're going to give you a couple minutes to go ahead and complete that.
And in order to see question 3, you may need to click on the poll box itself. You'll see a little scroll bar on the right-hand side. And so you may need to scroll down to get to the full extent of question number 3. But we have had great luck with this. We would love to hit our 90% response mark. So if you could just take a moment to complete the poll, we very much appreciate it. It also might be hiding behind your Zoom window with the panelists' video. So sometimes you have to sort of move things around in order to find it. We are over 70% of you have voted. Thank you so much. We have just a few remaining people who have yet to be able to vote. So if you could please put in your responses to those 3 questions. And Kit, Dorothy, I just wanted to let all of you know that there is appreciation. Thank you so much for your work and time to research these issues. And thank you to the library for hosting this. So that's nice. Thank you.
And I do want to remind everyone that there will also be a follow-up survey that will be automatically generated and sent to the same email address that you registered for this program through. And that's a little bit, I think there's maybe 10 questions or so. And that's a lot of demographic information, and some of these questions are repeated in there, but it's no less important that we get that info. Like I said, that really helps us improve our virtual programs, determine what other sort of programs we can be offering right now. And we really appreciate it.
And you have another vote of appreciation and thanks. It says the session was excellent and much appreciated. All right, we got to 100%. Thank you so much, everyone. This is so fun. I will post and share our responses here just so you can see how it works out. Looks like most of you do feel more informed and confident about the ballot measures, and I'm sure that the League of Women Voters of Santa Cruz County were very much hoping for that. And so that's great. It looks like quite a large percentage did get the information you wanted on the ballot measures. Admittedly, they do make the ballot measures very complicated. The text is extensive. And of course, the funding on both sides is also extensive.
All right, thank you, Sarah. And once again, thank you, Kit, Sandy, and Dorothy for all of your knowledge and taking the time this morning to present this to people to be more informed. And I really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for coming. And I think this is where we're going to end today. So I hope you all have a nice rest of your weekend, and check out the library's website for more info. Check out cavotes.org for more info, and vote. Vote, vote, vote.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care.